I'd like to call the meeting to order. Welcome everyone, and our first order of business is rise for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge
allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Welcome, and I will entertain approval of the agenda.
I make a motion to approve the agenda.
Second.
It's moved and seconded. Any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye, and we have public comment. I would just remind everyone that we welcome public comment from patrons, and it's limited to 3 minutes per person, must be appropriate for open forum, not identifying individuals or students, not be abusive, defamatory, or obscene. It's a board meeting held in public, not a public meeting, thus no discussion back and forth during public comment. So, Rebecca Holland, welcome. You can come all the way over.
Okay, good evening, Board.
I'm in
I'm Rebecca Holland. I am here with my friend Christine Moon. We both represent Reclaim Idaho and the education initiative that we worked and the community worked quite hard to get onto the ballot. It was over 100,000 signatures statewide that were collected and brought it forward as a citizens initiative. It was well on its way to passing, and Governor Little recognized that and called a special session, and they passed the money. So we're pleased to say that we helped win $410 million for public education in the state of Idaho. The important thing is come January is how those monies are going to be allocated. What we were collecting signatures for was, what the people were signing up for was basically career technical classes for the high school, an increase of those. Those are very much supported and needed. And I know I'm preaching to the choir, but I just want to let you know that those are the things that were on the initiative that we people signed for. The other thing very important is counseling. Across the board, it's recognized that we need more counselors at both elementary and secondary level, that students, it's been said that as long as students have somebody that they can touch base with, we're going to be catching problems, and we need to do that. Which is, again, preaching to the choir, but that is what the people recognized. And the third thing that was, again, a very obvious but very pointed direction for the monies, for the funds to go, would be for increasing our teacher and our staff salaries, so that we are competitive with other neighboring states. And that's primarily the gist of it. So we're pleased that monies have passed. It's going to be super important come January when they go into session as to how those monies actually get allocated, since they kind of co-opt the whole Quality Education Act that was very, very well written by Luke Mayville, who we're really proud to say was a Sandpoint Sable kid, and he's our director. So I came to you to let you know, to just give you that update, and we're anxious to come January. We're anxious to get the right people into office. That's why I'm wearing this. That will be there to support public education, and we just want to let you know that we're pleased and bring you up to date on that.
Thank you.
Thank you.
There's no one else on for public comment, so we're going to move straight into the purpose. This is rare that we would have a second meeting, but this meeting is specifically designated for this financial audit update and report. And for that reason, we welcome our auditor from Magnuson, McHugh and Company. And I believe you can hear us now.
I can. Can you hear me okay?
Yes, we can. Welcome.
Thank you. And then
I'm gonna. Superintendent Meyer, are you asking to?
Yeah, I just wanted to let everyone know that she's presenting via Zoom, because that's how she's presented they've presented the last couple of years. And in order for everyone to see the presentation, that she is here for all of you, and the sound has to come out of here. It's just the best audio visual we have. So I'm just kind of giving everyone an understanding of this is the person talking to the board.
Yes.
And this is the presentation the public can see, and it'll be on the website afterwards. So just wanted
Okay,
people to know.
excellent.
And this is Laura.
This is
Laura?
Ready for me to jump in?
Yes, we are. Thank you very much.
Okay. Well, hi everyone. My name is Laura Parasita. I'm an audit manager, and I'm part of a larger team of individuals that performs the annual audit for the school district. And like was mentioned, our firm is Magnus and McHugh, and we're up in, down in Coeur d'Alene. And so today I'm just going to run through some of the highlights from the 2022 audit. And the first slide talks a little bit about what an audit is. And so an audit is an examination and evaluation of the financial statements, and the goal is to obtain reasonable assurance that the financial statements are free from material misstatement. One thing that I would point out on this slide is that while we audit the information, we don't prepare it. The information is prepared and given to us by management as part of their role and their responsibility in it. And so just that understanding of the differences there. The next slide, you can go to that, Becky, is why is an audit required? One is because it's required by the state of Idaho. Another is that if an entity spends more than $750,000 in federal expenditures in a year, then it requires a single audit. And so we perform that as well. And that is a continuing audit that we do every year. And the next slide talks a little bit about audit results. So at the end of the audit, we provide an opinion on the financial statements. And this year, once again, we issued an unmodified opinion, or it's sometimes called a clean opinion. And it means that, in our opinion, the financial statements are fairly presented in all material respects in accordance with GAAP, or generally accepted accounting principles, which is the framework that LPO is required to report on. This is the highest level of assurance that we can provide. And then the two bullet points underneath that talk about two additional reports that are in the financial statements. And although we do not issue an opinion on the effectiveness of internal controls or on compliance, we do perform testing over those while we're doing the audit. And those reports discuss that we did not come across any material weaknesses or deficiencies in internal control that would need to be reported and brought to your attention. And we did not notice any deficiencies or findings, anything like that, issues like that with compliance with federal programs. And that's really what those two reports in the financial statements are talking about. So the next slide then talks a little bit about what internal controls are. So these are really the processes and checks and balances that the district has implemented and designed. And the purpose is to provide accurate financial reporting and also to try and prevent errors or fraud from happening. So this slide talks about some basic examples of those internal controls. So segregation of duties is a big one. Dual signatures on checks, auditing the student body funds, things like that. And so that just gives you a little bit more information on what those reports on the previous slide were talking about. So after that, the slide talks about the management discussion and analysis, and this is a part in the front of the financial statements. I always encourage people to read this part because it's written by management and it goes into considerable detail on what happened during the year, financial highlights. It also talks about upcoming plans and the outlook that management has for the district. And so it's really good information. You'll notice it's several pages, it's very detailed. And the next page talks a little bit about some of those financial highlights that I mentioned. So one thing to point out is that at the end of the fiscal year, June 22, there was a general fund balance of approximately 15.2 million, which is about 5.8 million above last year. And the MDA that I was just talking about goes into some really great detail on page 6 about why that increase happened. It mentions that some of it was budgeted, some of it was from the ESSER funding, the federal funding that has come out very recently, and then also from state funding. And with that, actual revenues in the general fund were about 4.2 million higher than what was budgeted, and actual expenditures were a little bit lower than what was budgeted, about 162,000. And then the other thing to point out is the district does not currently have any debt, so there is none reported on the financial statements. The slide after that talks a little bit about the budget process. The district does go through a budget process each year, and the budget can be very detailed, and so we think it really shows management's understanding of the district. And for reference, there are a few schedules in the financial statements that show for some key line items the actual revenues and expenditures versus what was budgeted, and so that can be some good information to look at as well. After that, this slide is for the general fund balance and talking a little bit about why that number is important. So that's the number we were talking about 2 slides ago. And that's because revenue stream for the district is not always consistent month to month. There can be differences in state and federal funding, so it really is important to have that number strong because it prevents any unnecessary borrowing. It gives some future financial stability, and then it's there if there are unexpected events that weren't foreseen. So after that, the GFAO actually recommends that there be at a minimum no less than 2 months of regular general fund operating within that balance. In the MD&A, it actually mentions that there is approximately 99 days, so maybe a little over 3 months right now, which is really great. We're well over that recommendation. And then we have a graph on the next slide that shows general fund balance year-over-year comparison. So with those numbers that we were just talking about, it just puts it into a little bit more visual form of the big increase in 2022. And then following that slide as well is similarly the revenues and expenditures for general fund. So again, both are up, but trending together very similarly to how they have in the past. So no major changes there. I think it's just a good visual to be able to see it. Other than that, that's really all I have for today. The audit went very smoothly, very well. We really enjoyed working with the team. And if anybody has any questions for me, feel free.
I turned on the camera so she could see.
If we have dialed down questions, our CFO Lisa Halls is here that we can, she'll answer some of those questions for us. I have one very general question, just more for the public's curiosity. How long does the audit take each year, and about how many of your auditor team comes?
So we come out for some field work originally in the spring. We start doing some testing, and then we come out in August, and then it takes us a couple months to issue the report. And I think this year there were 5 of us, and I think that's a pretty stable number. That's a pretty good number of what the team would typically look like.
Great.
So we come out 2 times
Yep.
throughout the year.
Thank you. Are there any other questions specifically for our auditor? Not necessarily if you have questions about the MD&A, but anything you'd like to ask Laura? We appreciate the work, and of course, it's always good to get a clean audit report. That's what we want to see every year, so I appreciate that, and thank you for the presentation.
Absolutely. Just reach out if you have any questions.
I would ask before you go, is there anything else, CFO Lisa Halls, you want to mention while she's on? Nope.
Nope, just that we need a motion to approve the fiscal year 21-22 audit.
Thank you. And I would entertain that motion.
I make a motion to approve the external audit report for fiscal year 2022 as presented by Magnuson, McHugh, and Company.
A second?
It's moved and seconded. Are there any discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. That motion passes. Looks like Laura's already gone. Thank you, Laura. But we do have a financial update. We'll follow right ahead with a financial update from our CFO. Lisa Halls, welcome. Thank you.
We're just
It was
getting-
a very detailed MD&A. Thank you. Exquisite reading.
Did she send it to you?
20, wait, how many? It was about 19 pages this time,
This is in your email, so it doesn't have to copy in your email.
but we appreciate it.
Why didn't she send it?
Okay, so
I'm
now,
going to wait until Becky pulls up a few pages of this management discussion and analysis before I start.
yep.
I have to bring 2 sets of glasses now because which ones can I read my own print with?
I like that I can keep blowing this up, and Lonnie's laughing because he's young, and mine is like
Mine are
enormous.
soon to be corrected. They'll go bad eventually.
I didn't
Mine
even think of
is
it
huge
until
print
she
over
came
here.
out.
Great.
Okay,
So, good evening. I'm going to give a brief presentation tonight. Sort of the content is two-pronged. First, I want to accent and highlight some of the major points of the fiscal year 22 that closed on June 30th of 22. Just warrant a little more detail than Laura's presentation just now. And particularly this very large increase in our general fund balance. I don't want the board or any stakeholders to be misled. It's very intentional and planned increase. And then second, I want to focus on a high level on some of the factors bearing on our district's future, and I do mean for several years, and also bearing in mind that our budgeting cycle for fiscal year 24 is right in front of us. So the content is going to come from the management discussion and analysis, which is part of a 76-page report, which will be posted on our website tomorrow. And as Dr. Meyer mentioned, we're also posting Magnuson McHugh's PowerPoint just presented. So compared to fiscal year 21, and I've written this management report, certainly fiscal year 22 offered much less financial uncertainty. And one of those components is that we passed an indefinite term supplemental levy that went into effect July 1st, 2021, so the beginning of the fiscal year, we now join 5 other school districts, or we're the 5th in the state to have this indefinite term levy, which means just that. It's an indefinite term levy for $12.7 million per year. And I also would point out that that means we don't go back to the voters every 1 or 2 years. We have been a district now since July of '99, and have had a supplemental levy in place since we've been a district, which is a really big effort on all parts, administratively and the community. Other things that are important to know is that the value of our district went from fiscal year 22, which just closed, to I just got this stuff from the county today, about a few hours ago. We're now close to $11 billion in valuation. That's an increase of $4 billion from the prior year. So this says that in fiscal year 22, our levy rate dropped by 8%, and for those now receiving their tax bills in December of 22 to be paid in January of 23, the levy rate has dropped by 35%. would be $121 per 100,000 net taxable value. And this levy, now indefinite term, is 33% of our general fund revenues. It's fulcrum to the operations of the district, and in the absence of that, there would be very drastic cuts programmatically across the district. And we're not alone. 90 of the 114 districts that can levy supplemental levies have those in place in 22. And that was about $218 million collected in property taxes last year for supplemental levies in the state. We go on to the next page, Becky, page 5, please. So the other thing that's really important for last fiscal year is that our enrollment popped up to pre-pandemic levels. We saw an increase of 392 students. But absenteeism was high, and that was not only in Lake Pend Oreille School District, but across the state. And the governor's office and the State Board of Education heard that right out of the chute, and retroactively for the second year in a row, approved that instead of school districts being paid on average daily attendance, which is what's in the statute, they would be paid on a second temporary rule for the whole year on enrollment. And so that bolster, and we I've written cryptically over here, we budgeted on ADA because that's the most conservative thing, and that's what we knew legislatively in statute was going to happen when we adopted the budget. And so that was an infusion of close to $2 million that was unbudgeted in one of the slides from Magnuson. And this year we've also budgeted on kind of the same level enrollment, and that has come to fruition by and large. So also again, referring to last year, the federal COVID relief packages. The first was CARES, the second was SRSA, the third was ARPA. There's also been several allocations from the governor's COVID relief money, and then also some money in our special education programs and actually in some child nutrition programs. And last fiscal year, we spent all of the second package, SRSA, and part of the third package, ARPA. But what's most salient is that supplanting is allowed. And supplanting is you take a current expense and you can basically move it to a different spending authority, or in this case, it's a federal funded. That's never ever happened in public education with federal funds. Supplanting is absolutely prohibited. You must supplement, you must add programs and resources with federal funds, but not with the ESSER suite. So strategically, right out of the gate, for some unique reasons, particularly in how our district is allowed under the federal special education law to meet what's called the maintenance of effort, we were able to supplant a lot of the special education staff into our ESSER packages. And that means last year we supplanted about $3 million. And this singly is the factor of why we're able to bolster our general fund. And this isn't just a one-year thing. We went extensively through this on March 8th of 2022. Spent probably 45 minutes with the board. Yeah. And between all the packages that we've either expended or will expend, it's an infusion of $11 million over about 3 fiscal cycles for us. Really significant amount of money. Next page, please. So now a little bit more about why did the general fund balance, and that just means reserves on hand, cash on hand. That's what fund balance means in governmental accounting. Why did it pop up by $5.8 million? So first we have to carve off about $746,000 because those are local grants that are obligated and have very specific parameters. So really the bump is about $5.1 million. And some of it's budgeted We talked about that last March, and some of it isn't. So the things that were budgeted, we knew we were going to supplant about $3 million in these 2 ESSER packages. Second, we decided, and it's allowed to charge what are called indirect costs, and we collected $500,000 in indirect costs. Third, and unbudgeted, the child nutrition program under the USDA has traditionally either just breaks even, but more normative is for our general fund to transfer money to balance so that we're not in a deficit spending mode for our child nutrition program. And that's several $100,000 a year, but because of the 2-year free breakfast and free lunch universally throughout the nation with higher reimbursement rates, for fiscal year 22 and for fiscal year 21, we actually infused about another $500,000. So we repaid loans from prior fiscal years back to the general fund. And then I mentioned that not budgeted was, we built our budget on fiscal year 22 on average daily attendance, and we were paid on enrollment, and that was another increase of about $2 million. And of course, we've never had this kind of increase in reserves ever. If we increase our reserves by $500,000 or something unusual, $1 million, but $5 million is absolutely unprecedented. But I'm here to accent that is planned, and our long-term financial planning is part of our strategy. Next page, please. So then, this just visually on the bottom, yes, thank you, shows for all what they say, all governmental funds. So not our general fund, but all the funds, the $50 million we expended last year. And you'll see that I said, well, the federal component went from fiscal year 21 from 15% to 17%. But it normally is about 10% for our district and nationally. So if we were normally at 10%, that would have been $5 million of our budget. But the ESSER increase, 17% is $8.5 million, an increase of $3.5 million, and that's the ESSER component. And on the top of this slide, it shows you how in the graph above it, graph 1, if you could. This is just the general fund, and this breakdown is very normal. The property taxes, our supplemental levy has been about 1/3, and our state appropriation is about 65%. That part stayed constant. It's this infusion of ESSER dollars that overall has an impact not only last fiscal year and the fiscal year we're currently in. Next page, please. So now I just want to spend a little bit of time on factors that I think bear on our district's future. So the major takeaway tonight is that these ESSER funds are pivotal to our long-term financial planning. It facilitates us fundamentally and substantially increasing our general fund reserves, and what that allows us to do in turn is to ensure that our indefinite term levy, which is a fixed amount, will allow us to operate as a district within that levy capacity for several fiscal cycles. And I presented to you last March that was at least through fiscal year 27 with some pretty aggressive inflation numbers built in there that was predicated on an 8% inflation and some kind of low increases in state appropriation. And so, I guess I'm here to say out loud that it could go well beyond fiscal year 27, but this fixed amount has already been in place. Let's see, we're in our 5th year, so it will be, at least a decade at a fixed amount for our voters. And then we will have spent almost all of this $11 million through the various ESSER packages by the end of this fiscal year, even though the expiration date is 15 months later, September 30th of 2024. And the one exception may be, We have a lot of the HVAC projects, which are just close to $1 million in expense that are slated for next June and July, August. Next page, please, chapter 9. So I would be, the second bullet, and intentionally so after the ESSER implications, is that we as a district have none of the construction levies that, property tax levies, to either upgrade or build new buildings or really big capital projects. We're very unusual as a district. In any given year, 80% of districts have a plant levy or a bond or both. And not only do we not have one, but historically, we've had one bond. It was in 1953, and precious few plant levies. And this absolutely hamstrings and just overall, I write, deteriorates the overall financial fiscal health of our district. Next bullet talks about our current state superintendent, along with all the other agency heads, must give a draft budget request for fiscal year 24 on September 1st of 2022. She asked for a 6.9% increase. The governor will unveil his spending blueprint January 2nd, 2023. That's the first day of the legislative session. And we have a statewide election in a few weeks, and if there was a change up in the state superintendent, a new incoming superintendent would be able to modify the draft request as he or she goes before JFAC in mid-February of 2023. And something, I've mentioned this a couple times, but I really want to keep our eye out on, besides, are we going to be paid on enrollment permanently? What's going to happen with that is, last year there was a large increase to something called discretionary funding, which is bifurcated between health insurance and non-health insurance. And for us, it offered our district about $800,000 in flexibility. And I will be watching to see if we lose that flexibility in this upcoming legislative session. And then, no surprise, all states also received large infusions of ESSER dollars, including Idaho. And then also Idaho's economy has just been performing very well, so they closed out their fiscal cycle, which is concurrent with ours, with the highest reserve balance ever, $1.3 billion. And of course, when you're washed with a fair amount of cash, that offers that a lot of issues can be discussed, or there could be a lot of policy fights. And we will see those unfold. And of course, our public comment earlier today addressed the Governor Little held a special session on September 1st and 2nd. Since I've been in this role, that's only the third special session. They are not normal in Idaho. In many states, they are normal. And $330 million, or 16%, dollar equivalent to 16% of this year's state appropriation for K-12 of $2.1 billion. Will be directed to K-12 school districts. And so the next steps are that the legislature will have to put it in statute and determine actually how that funding is appropriated. And for us, just using kind of a back of the napkin, because in the absence of knowing how it's going to flow to us, that would be another $4 million to Lake Pend Oreille School District itself. It's really monumental. And the revenue source for that is state sales tax. Revenue should basically setting up a whole new set-aside fund from state sales tax. And then the final page are, I feel like a teacher, I just want to say it again and again and again, that districts nationally are going to start to wrestle with what happens when these one-time emergency COVID relief ESSER funds run out. And for us, we've been aggressive. We're spending them and will be done this year. But, you know, we're well positioned because we, by and large, with some intentional capital projects, have supplanted our ESSER funds and built up our general fund reserves. And then I've mentioned that we're operating under a temporary rule again this fiscal cycle, fiscal year 23, and we really hope that some kind of permanent solution will come out of the 2023 session. And then this is an election year where there are 45 of the 105 members of our Idaho legislature will be elected, and most, or importantly, the powerful budget setting committee, more than half of those members, including the chair and vice chair, will be new. And normally JFAC is meeting in the summer, and last week in October, I can listen in on multiple days of sort of revenue discussions, and none of that happens. The committee chairs will be appointed on December 1st. And then finally, I hope that you know, the district, we continue to try to educate and communicate on our financial and facility and capital needs and just the overall condition of the district. And then the final 2 pages that I have here just show you that we elect and have, since I've been here, to, in our accounting software and in our audit report, break out our supplemental levy. This is very unusual. This is on the revenue side, and then if you go to the next page, this is on the expenditure side. I do think that this probably will come into statute because now, as effective July 1st of 2022, if you're running a supplemental levy, you actually have to, in some way, kind of, you don't have to line item it, but you have to provide a lot more detail on what that supplemental levy will be covering. Mm-hmm. So that concludes my prepared remarks. Actually, I should show you that this is important one. This is important to know that in these general grants, which are paid, and the big teacher paid grants, the big idea, some Rotary grants. You know, this is a significant amount of money that comes into our district from local or state sources that are not governmental entities. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. So that concludes my prepared remarks. Are there any questions?
I have one question.
Sure.
Page 6, you said indirect cost. What is that exactly? Like, can you explain that?
Yeah, so there are certain federal grants, the majority of them, so this is a federal law or federal regulation that says you can charge indirect costs. And that means that to support administratively the monitoring and you know, the payroll, like who would fall under indirect costs here? Clerk of the board, our superintendent, my position, the financial team, anything that isn't sort of directly in the, I guess I'm going to say, the scope of the federal grant, then you have to apply for it annually and be approved, and it's based on the administrative expenditures. You know, it's sort of honestly quite a very complicated formula that we apply for. And I would say with our other federal grants, we don't charge the indirect costs, but in this case, we have the opportunity to basically you know, increase our general fund reserves legally by charging.
It's like the support staff behind the scenes to administer the actual
right, but
direct
it's
grant
also like
costs.
the heat and the snow plowing. It's sort of all those things that aren't actually probably happening right there in the classroom.
Yeah. That's a good question because I thought of that too when you were talking. Is there any other questions? As I say, the MD&A really sets us up well to looking through the rest of the pages. Otherwise, it's a little mind-boggling. So I really appreciate the time and effort you put in.
Great, thank you.
Every year on that document.
Okay. Thanks so much.
Yeah.
Thank you, Lisa.
Yes.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Is there anything else on this? Okay. Okay, well, we're moving right on into just a brief update from our trustee, Tanya Sherman, who went to the ISBA Region 1 meeting, and you were the only one available for it, so you're going to give us your highlight.
Quick highlights. They walked through all the resolutions, pros and cons. I think that the greatest part that impacted my thought process on how we vote as a board is that there's many of these things that may not impact us. However, when we think of other schools, and someday that it may impact us, that we want to show that support. So that was my large takeaway.
Nice. It is helpful to go at least once to those, and I know that most of us will be together at the ISBA meeting in a couple weeks.
All of us.
Right? Everyone's going. Okay, good.
All of us.
Wow. Full house. Excellent. So thank you for that little update, and we'll move right on to consent agenda, and I will entertain a motion approving.
I make a motion to approve the consent agenda.
I'll second.
It's moved and seconded. Any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Aye. That motion passes. And we go on, we have quite a few action items, and we're going to start with calendar changes for the 22-23. I will turn it over to Dr. Meyer.
Do you want me to share? Yeah. The clerk of the board is going to.
I will turn it over to the clerk of the board.
So the calendar changes, let me pull it up really quick. Do you want to just display the calendar?
Is it in?
Yeah. We just don't have it on
Okay.
the view of her.
Now look, I taught her this program, and now she's teaching it back to me. That's pretty.
Comes full
That's.
circle.
That's excellent.
I guess I could have done.
It's
it.
right there.
It's
Yep.
just if I sign in.
So you're going to see both the student and certificated. Obviously, the certificated is the teaching staff. It's not for full-time employees like myself who work a full calendar year of certain days. So this is a student calendar. If you remember, we did change April 19th. We added that day. So that's on there just for a brief review. And then we moved, not we, you as the board, moved the student-led conferences in March from, I believe, the first Friday in March to the second, to March 10th. Now the teachers felt like it would be better for November for student or parent-teacher conferences on the 16th, 17th, and 18th to allow those days that were originally scheduled on the 17th and 18th to be brought up to the 16th and 17th. So they had higher attendance at those. So they would then be on Wednesday and Thursday and not a Thursday and Friday. So that's actually the only change that you'll see. And then the certificated calendar reflects that exact same thing.
Okay.
There's a lot more details in the certificated calendar like I shared, but that's for the teaching staff and not necessarily parents.
And on this certificated staff also, the only changes we're looking at tonight is the 16th and 17th rather than 17th, 18th. So, are there any questions? Because this is a motion to approve this.
I have a question. It has the 18th still an early release. Is that normal?
They are, yes. So there's an opportunity, and I don't know if with the minutes that the teachers have, they've traded out that half day for a part of the day in November for Thanksgiving. And that was with the negotiations. I'm not, I can't speak in detail to that.
I can't either.
On there from the original.
Regularly, yeah.
Calendar of the 17th, 18th, we just didn't take it off.
No, it's remaining, yes.
Okay.
It's part of the agreement that came out of
Out of negotiations.
board.
But the availability for parents are going to be that Wednesday, Thursday versus the Thursday, Friday.
And not Friday at all.
And not Friday at all. I couldn't hear what was going on down there, so if I misspoke.
No, you did
Okay,
not.
sorry.
We had a confusion over here. It's all cleared up.
Was on the original the Wednesday not an early release then?
Wednesdays are always early
Oh, they
release.
are?
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah.
And that's for,
It's like the best day of the week for students. They love it.
but that's for students, but staff remain their regular workday for
Okay.
professional learning communities.
I'm learning all kinds of stuff.
Okay, so we have the calendars, and as always, we have to, I would hear a motion to approve the calendar changes that you've just been presented.
Do you need a separate one for each calendar?
No.
Yep. I move to approve the calendar changes for the 2022-2023 school year.
Student and certificate.
Student and certified.
Second.
It's moved and seconded. Any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. That motion passes. We have a lot of policy discussion now, and we have second reading on these policies. And the first one we're going to look at is the 2345 Race and Curriculum. It's in your packet, and it is second reading. So we discussed this one. This is a new policy, and it's before us for second reading. So the changes that were made from our past discussion, was there anything? I need a refresher on if anything changed between last and this one.
We're doing discussion right now then? Or do we do that?
She added,
Let me just get it.
the clerk added this dignity.
The clerk added that reference. And other than that, we didn't change anything from first reading to now.
So in first reading, you guys, as the board, discussed in detail a one-word language change.
Yeah.
And I did not add it in because after reviewing your discussion, it seemed like you were
Right.
all on the same board with it, but I didn't change it because it wasn't clear to me listening back to your meeting that you were all in agreement, and
Asking you to change it.
I
right.
would just ask that if you wanted to change that, I'd be more than happy to change it still, but I did not add it.
And
that
correct, I don't
word
think
is
we-
from plural. I can't say that word.
Pluralistic.
honestly. Thank
Pluralistic.
you.
I don't think we came to a consensus
diverse.
that was
Too
worth
diverse.
changing. Yeah, pluralistic to diverse, but we did have lengthy discussion on this language in here.
Well, yeah, I'm obviously in favor of changing it because I'm the one who brought it up.
Yes, you did.
I think diverse is a much less polarizing political word, and it still accomplishes what we needed to accomplish personally. But that was my.
Is there any other discussion on this language?
Motion.
I will entertain a motion to approve the policy 2345.
I make a motion to approve policy 2345 as presented.
I'll second it.
It's moved and seconded. Is there any discussion?
Yes.
Okay,
I would
I
like
could
to
tell you
see
had a
the
copy.
change from pluralistic to diverse.
Okay, so there is,
So it would be a modification we'll have to read.
is there any other opinion here on changing from pluralistic to diverse? We didn't have consensus on it last meeting.
I think we did, but it wasn't done this way.
It wasn't clear enough. Okay.
Yeah, I felt like at the end of the discussion that we all felt pretty good about making the change, but I guess it just wasn't communicated clearly. to
Communicated
make the
clearly
change.
enough.
As my understanding would have it. But
Okay, and I am maybe mixing up the discussions because it was one where we
It
were
was
like,
the
we're leaving
equity
it that
one.
way. And this was
That
not
was
that
that
way.
was a different one, I
Yeah.
think,
Yes.
where we didn't. This one, I felt like we were all pretty.
Okay, thank you for
I
that
agree.
reminder. Tanya, what's your?
I don't have a preference either way. If our board would prefer to have diverse, I'm 100% supportive of that.
Doesn't bother me either way as pluralistic or diverse.
Okay, so I'm hearing through the discussion that we would like to adapt the policy to change the word from pluralistic to diverse. And so in that case, we bring it back.
I would ask that you amend your motion that's on the floor.
I would like, let's see, I make a amended motion, I'd like to amend the motion for the approval of policy 2345, race in the curriculum, with the changing pluralistic in paragraph 3 to diverse society.
Okay.
Second.
Okay, it's moved and seconded. Is there any more discussion on the amended motion? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. That motion passes. Thank you for the discussion.
That motion was about as clear as mud.
It got slippery right there.
I apologize
That's my cue
for,
cards.
yeah, okay. Now I have to get back. Hold that thought, everyone. Let's all go to the next. So we have a second policy to discuss, and it is 2470 self-directed learners. As you remember, these are also new, brought to us through state policy changes. I believe Casey presented these to us last, or gave us the background on them. I'll entertain a motion to approve policy 2470.
I make a motion to adopt new policy 2470, self-directed learners.
I'll second that.
It's moved and seconded. Is there any discussion?
The only discussion I had was what I mentioned last time, was it worth in paragraph 6 where it says that a self-directed learner status may be terminated by the district faculty. What did we discuss on that, if we needed to add parent guardian in that paragraph, just for the sake of repetition, because it's already listed up above to include their parent guardian with having the student start the self-directed learners.
Right, and I do remember this discussion, and we talked about the fact that it's always at the,
We feel like it's pretty
At
good
the-
and
at
covered.
the
We don't need to list it
par-
out there.
right.
The
And
parent
and
can
it's also
terminate.
in the procedure part of the
Procedures.
That's right, that's what it was. It was in the
right, it was in the
but not
procedure part,
here.
yeah.
in the procedures.
So I didn't know if we decided to add it here or not.
Well, decided.
I think the decision was, like, instead of bogging down the policy side of
Okay.
things, like,
To leave it where it
we'll
was
lean
in
on
the procedure.
procedure side of things for the actual nuts and bolts.
Okay.
Can I mention just something?
Yes.
It says the review team in the procedure will submit to the building principal written recommendation to
Oh.
rescind the designations. The review team would consist of the parent as well.
The parent is part of that review team, okay.
Cool.
In the procedure you're reading,
it.
yeah,
That's in the procedure.
yeah. Okay, is there any other discussion on this one? All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. That motion passes. Thank you. We have a third. It is also a new policy, mastery-based education, 2640. I'll hear a motion.
I make a motion to adopt new policy 2640, mastery-based education.
A second.
It's moved and seconded. Is there any other discussion on this policy? I'm trying to remember if there's anything. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. That motion passes. And we have a revision to policy 3085. Let me just pull that one back up, so give me a minute. Okay, I will hear a motion to approve policy 3085, sexual harassment, discrimination, and retaliation.
I make a motion to adopt the revisions to policy 3085, sexual harassment, discrimination, and retaliation.
Second.
It's moved and seconded. Any discussion?
I did, just the same deal I had earlier on the last one with the word equity, just the way that it's being used. I know it's Title IX is the reference at the bottom,
Mhm.
but I don't know, because it in that very first paragraph, it says equity in education, equal opportunity for employment. It uses the term equal already, and I was just wondering if it would be possible to just remove the word equity out of there, because I know the word itself is okay, but the way that it's being used has a lot of social
So
constructs tied to it.
I looked this up a little bit,
Yep.
and my only concern with removing it is that because it is federal title language, and then we pull from federal policy and put it into here, you want to be as consistent as possible in that language. So I would have concerns about changing it in this context. That would just be my concern.
We've also had some discussion. I know you have had a little bit of feedback from Dr. Meyer and even our clerk. It puts us in a little bit of a liability position to change that. We would be, I understand your point about it sort of being used right now in this climate we're in. However, we open ourselves up and make ourselves vulnerable. There's certain environments where we can't be equal.
So just to confirm, the wording in that paragraph right there, or even that line, I guess more specifically, is pretty copy and paste from the federal policy, federal guidelines then? And there's no leeway to remove that word, or even just say, equal opportunity for employment and education? And just take the word equity in education?
I would have to research that. I cannot say for sure that.
If it's copy and pasted over, like,
Yeah,
I get that.
I would have to research that further.
But if there's any leeway to do that, it's not so like,
We're in discussion. Well, and we did have this discussion. I mean, you've
Yeah.
already referenced. We had this discussion, and
if I get outvoted, I get outvoted.
exactly, and
It's discussion time.
I
so wanna
note
talk
I note the direction you're taking, and I understand the background on why you're addressing it this way. At our last meeting, I sort of called for consensus among the 5 of us, because there may not be a point where we're all in full agreement on it.
Right.
And so, just curious if the board is comfortable moving to a vote, or if you would like to discuss this more.
I'll call for question.
Okay, so I will go forward for the vote on this at this time. All those in favor?
Aye.
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 Any opposed? Any abstain?
Yeah, I'll abstain.
There's 4 in favor and 1 abstain, and that motion passes. Thank you, though, for the input and the discussion. We're going to move to the last policy. I had to put my glasses on. The last policy, another new policy, 3345. Use of restraint, seclusion, and aversion techniques. I'll hear a motion.
I make a motion to adopt new policy 3345, use of restraint, seclusion, and aversive techniques for students.
A second.
It's moved and seconded. As you note, there is the 3rd definition added. That was the one thing we were looking at. Is there any other discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. That motion passes also. And we sailed through those. We have administrative announcements. Let's start with Dr. Meyer. Is there any other?
I just wanted to make sure that we mentioned that you already did a little bit, that we are going to the ISBA conference next week together, or
2 weeks. 2 weeks.
Down in Coeur d'Alene, so that'll be great. And also recognize for one last time the Clerk of the Year award for Miss Kelly Fisher. She will be handing off at that event, she will be handing off the baton to the next Clerk of the Year, and she is also teaching a few classes, workshops down there. She has obviously well esteemed in the state, and so she will also be teaching if anyone wants to see those. I want to just make sure we go to a lot of diverse things, so if we meet ahead of time to talk, to make sure if people are covering some, I can go to others, so we can get as much information as possible.
Excellent point. Yeah, that's going to be great, and it's so handy that it's in Coeur d'Alene this year. It's much closer to home, so we'll all be there. Are there any announcements from administrators here? So with that, I will hear a motion to move into executive session.
Jalen, you want it? I
Rochambeau.
I make a motion to move into executive
Ooh,
session.
new.
Fort Idaho Code Title 74, Section 206, subsection 1E, to consider the evaluation, dismissal, or disciplining of, or to hear complaints or charges brought against a public officer, employee, staff member, or individual agent or public school student.
I second that.
It's moved and seconded. Roll call vote.
Roll call vote, Trustee Peters.
Aye.
Trustee Sherman.
I
Trustee Decker.
Aye.
Trustee Williams.
Aye.
Chair Lewis.
Aye.
Thank you.
Thank you.
should we take this